Okay, so we have our watercolor paper all taped down, and I'm going to soak this using a spray bottle, maybe. There we go. One should make sure their spray bottle's working before trying to do a demo video. Hey, we gotta love learning though, right? Mistakes make the world go round. All right. So essentially we just want to soak this watercolor paper down pretty good, and I'm going to use my itty bitty brush here because the whole point of this video is to teach simple techniques using minimal products. And this is a watercolor set that I have found online that I'm happy with the way the pigments work and operate. And it comes with this handy dandy little brush. And just to make things nice and easy, rather than trying to show a bunch of different techniques using various brushes, I'm going to use just the one and show that you don't need a lot to create something pretty. So the first thing we're going to really focus on, once this paper soaks up this water, as you can see it's pretty wet, this is going to be just a quick demo for skies and making clouds. So looks like we're pretty wet there. And let's see. Let's go with a purple and mix a little blue in there. Make sure we bring in some more water. I like purple and blue blended together. It makes a nice cloudy, smoky sky, sort of stormy looking, if you will. All right, now what I'm doing is I'm going to just take these pigments that I'm picking up with my brush. I'm not adding a bunch of water to either of these pigments, but before I set it in here, because I'm trying to get a wet on wet technique, I'm going to dip it back in the water before putting it onto the paper to encourage those pigments to float. And we're going to just kind of do these erratic looking lines across our paper, and let's try and make sure we'll have like a lake effect. So in order to do a lake effect or anything on water, you want to try and make sure that you're going to cover a pretty similar pattern to get that reflection believable for your viewer. And reflections can be a little tricky. Our eye likes to copy things exactly as we see them, and so trying to do the opposite of what you're seeing up here down here can take some practice, but it can be done. We just need to give ourselves some patience, and practice makes perfect. You know what I'm saying? All right. Got this awesomely soaking wet paper here. I know a few of my watercolor instructors would probably be shaking their head at how I'm showing you all how to do this right here, because as you can see, my paper's starting to bulge and get wavy. There's like so much water on it. And then we're also puddling down here. So we'll move this over here. There's another way in which you can like secure your paper so that it doesn't bubble as much. But this is, again, going back to whatever you can get your hands on to start making art. The idea is that we just get started and not focus on having the best supplies. And I got started with watercolor paints using painter's tape and just taping it directly down onto a surface like this. And it proves rather effective one way or the other. So you can start to see how these pigments are moving around the paper and blending in with the fibers from the paper. Watercolor paper is made with a blend of paper fiber and cloth fiber, so that it can be durable and you can get it soaking wet without worrying about it ripping. That's also a trick to the trade for those of you that aren't used to using watercolors. Water by its very nature tends to destroy paper, so you need to have special paper for watercolors that can absorb it. And what does better for absorption than cloth? All right. I've still got quite a bit of moisture on this paper. Okay. But I just want to kind of close this gap up here. All right. Let's see. And let's just go. I'm going to grab a little purple and just go right through here and kind of make a purple horizon line, if you will. I'm going to keep this simple. I'm just dividing this paper right in the middle when I get to that point. All right, so we're going to have our lake on the bottom, sky up top. We see where the water's been puddling here in our lake. How fitting. And those pigments are really traveling around. We've got a pretty good dip in here, and that's okay. We're just going to let it do its thing. And now I'm going to focus on what colors I want to bring in for trees across the water. And I like to mix blue and green and brown together. I know brown's usually one of those colors people like to pass over because, you know, it's brown. But in all reality, if you really want to bring in like a natural, soothing feeling to things, and to mute your colors, because sometimes, like, you don't live in reality where like things are bright green or bright red. Like, depending on how the sun's shining, you get a lot of shadows, and brown's a really great color to bring in for shadows. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm doing essentially what's going to look like if you're going to be like recording music or something along those lines for any of you musicians that are following this little demo. I'm doing trees while my water is, or while my paper is still pretty soaking wet. I'm going to do through here a line of trees that will be seen from across my lake. And because, again, we're looking for getting a reflection, I want to try and make sure that the reflection that I'm putting in here for these trees matches what's above, so below. All right, as above, so below when trying to paint a body of water like a lake and you're looking to get reflections. All right. Now this is all the wet on wet stage of painting, so we can put kind of our layout down while it's like in this soaking wet stage. We start with clouds, we do backgrounds. Something I try and tell people is you don't see that which is in the distance or in the background with clarity. Our eyes are always blurring things. So don't try and paint with perfection backgrounds. You're not painting trees, you're painting the forest. And the forest is a bunch of lumpy green. It does not look perfect. We just want to give the impression of trees in the background. Okay. So now that we have the background of our lake, again, still pretty moist in this area. I maybe needed to come through with like a tissue to soak some of this up. So let's see. If we do have too much water, you can come through with like your rag or your tissue or something. But what you do not want to do is smear it. Don't go. You'll push all those pigments all over the place. You'll make a wonderful mess and you'll be mad at yourself because you did exactly what frustrates everyone about watercolor. You got ahead of yourself, you and got impatient and probably ruined the painting. So watercolor is all about patience and letting go of the illusion of control to let the pigments kind of do their own thing. We have a little bit of control in where it is that we put things down on the paper and how much water we want to put on it. But like this up here, I have no say in that. And as this painting kind of pushes those pigments around, again, a reason that I like these watercolor paints is the pigments are very active and easy to see. We'll get some interesting splitting. Well, don't fall on me. Okay. All right, now let's go ahead and paint in where we'll have some foreground. So where we're gonna have the land ahead of the lake. All right. And again, it's totally fine if this is gonna like bleed into your water. We're trying to keep it down this way because we are creating the land ahead of the lake. Okay, and again, I'm using that blue, green, and brown. I'm not using any sort of like set formula. I've been doing this long enough that it comes pretty intuitively as far as like the colors that I'm hoping to achieve. This is sort of my go-to. It's been my go-to since I started painting. I love stormy blue skies and moody lake scenes where the colors are just a little muted because you know when the sun goes behind the clouds you get a little more gray, and when you mix brown and blue together you actually you get gray, if you didn't know that already. So we're just going to keep adding in here. So essentially when you're making your foreground, it's very similar to making your sky. Except I've given myself a space in which I want to put those colors. I'm not going all over the place. I want them here. And just allowing those pigments to kind of float where they want to go. We're going to see effects that make it look like trees or grass. We don't make the grass. We encourage the water to go where we would like it to go, and then we keep ourselves open to whatever the pigments choose to do with one another when they meet each other. So this is where I'm at. I'm thinking I kind of want to add a little island here off in the distance, or like a little peninsula. Try and not get that too, I've got so much water in the middle of that paper. Okay, I don't want it to be like a big island. I just want it to come this way, and that way I can show you how to like do an island. So just like the trees, the island has to have a reflection, so it needs to look like sort of like an arrow coming out at first. All right, now that we're here, I'm going to take the bottom of my brush and we're going to use the bottom of the brush and we're going to do a line right down the center where our line of trees are, and we're going to define where our lake is. And still using this brush, we're going to do the same thing to our island. We're going to push those pigments, drag it right across, and try and do a straight line. It's okay if you don't. What I end up doing is I use the bottom of the brush to push those pigments aside to give the impression of like sparkles on the water. Okay. And then we'll do the same up here. Okay. And just keep pushing. All right. All right, so we've got some spots of the paper that have started to dry pretty good. This is where the second phase of detail work will come in. And we're going to work on just painting some more defined trees, like pine trees. So we start by doing a line straight down. Whatever we do on the top, we want to do on the bottom. And from the top going down, make sure that your branches are coming off to create more of that triangle effect. And then repeat that with your reflection. Okay, it's a little green for me, so let's see. I love this brush. It's got like this wild hair on it. Okay. All right. And we add some more of these trees. We got trees from across the lake. All right. And to also understand that we've got shadows and trees and stuff, so we can kind of add some darker spots in along that tree line. again, we don't need to have like a whole bunch of our trees defined, as long as we're kind of giving the impression of our forest back here in the distance, be at the other side of the lake. And something to keep in mind is usually when you're painting the opposite side of your lake, like this is giving the viewer the impression of what the side of the lake that they're standing on is going to look like. And so you really are kind of building like a little world for somebody else to step into. All right, let's go to this side. I use my pinky to set it on the paper, and I'm feeling to make sure that it's dry enough because I don't want to set my finger into a wet spot and then like smear the paint. So I steady my hand with my pinky, and ooh, that one was wet. All right. So come in, that way I can have a little more control with the rest of my hand to get some more of this like detail stuff in. And we'll balance this out. Now, I know a lot of people are always thinking like, oh, how do I make mountains? And I know that it feels very practical to paint your mountains as a background and then paint over them. But honestly, like mountains should be one of the last things that you paint because you want that to be a very sharp, defined line to know where the mountains meet your sky. And you can't do that if your paper is soaking wet. What you can do while your paper is soaking wet is make some cool looking trees off in the distance and make it look like there's this fantastic like reflection in them for them. All right, this one is a little too obvious for me, so we're going to do some more scraping. We'll do some scraping over here, bring out some more of that color or that white paper off in the distance. Okay, I'm really liking the way that this is turning out here. So watercolor is definitely one of those mediums that the more you work with it and the more you begin to understand like the nature of it, the easier it gets to know what you should do next on your painting. Because you need to pay attention to like how dry your paper is in spaces and also how wet it is in spaces in order to achieve certain effects. Like you see how we have our pigments that are just spreading like crazy over here. Very, very interesting effects happening. So that we need to make sure that we're not going to be adding things. For instance, if I'm wanting to do a detail and something that's going to take some good line work like you see in this tree over here, I need to wait for that whole paper to be dry. So I've kind of found myself in a space where there's not much more. Oh, I guess there's one more thing that we can do here. To do grass in your foreground, we're going to take the bottom of our brush again, and you're just going to pull those pigments up. And you're going to scratch into the paper, and water likes to follow a channel. So what you're essentially doing is you're scratching a channel into the paper. You can come in here and get that wet again. Okay. And you'll see how the water will fill in where you've made those indentions by scratching onto the paper. So great little trick for making grass look like it was very detailed with like a fine hand with the brush. You can come in here and kind of add some more blades of grass. All right. And same thing over here. You can add some blades of grass. All right. And I'm looking for where there's still wet in my land areas to try and bring these grass blades up. I waited a little long. I admittedly forgot that I wanted to put those in here. So we're just going to push those up and hopefully get what we're after here. Okay, it's looking pretty good. I'm happy with what I'm seeing so far. All right, so this is first step in preparing your watercolor landscape layout. And we have done our wet on wet and scratched away pigments where we can, and started to show where once the paper starts to get dry that we can start adding some more detail work. And the next video we will finish out this painting, and I'll show you how to use control with your brush to create some bushes, trees, fill it in some rocks, and just kind of complete this painting, if you will. All right, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you've enjoyed watching this.